Good morning, folks.
Good morning.
Good morning, Probe. Love the shark. Ian, surprise. Good morning or good evening.
It's good afternoon. I'm here at the State of OpenCon with a bunch of our friends.
That's right. Yep. How's the con going so far?
Pretty good, but I'm about to ruin it with my musical preferences. I'm apparently DJing at 6 p.m. in a few hours, so we'll see how that goes.
Now I'm doubly sad I'm not there to see it.
It's funny. I'm much more stressed about that than I am about my panel tomorrow.
Have you picked your DJ moniker yet?
Tracks. Oh no, I just always have gone under my own name. I never found something more suitable than that, more distinctive than that. I guess the other Brian Billardorf has issues with it.
Blistering Brian B.
You have a sort of a crate that you always travel with. You have a deck that you brought with you. I'm trying to visualize this Brian DJing. How the setup like. Maybe sometime we'll catch you DJing at DNA Lounge or something in SF. For those still joining, I'm going to drop a link in the Zoom chat to our meeting notes. Feel free to add yourself to the attendance list if you'd like to. Bob sends his regrets, so I will be chairing the meeting today. I'm going to give it one more minute for folks to show up. I see our list is still growing. If anyone has last minute things to try and get on the agenda, feel free to add them on to the end of that list. It does look fairly full if some of these end up with discussions. Thanks for the note, Luke. The only thing that needs a vote that I'm aware of is the TAC election, and that's going to be our probably our second topic. I might bump this one up just to make it a quick announcement. We do have some news to share from yesterday about the open source summit. So. Okay, participants list has been a bit stable, so let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to Tuesday, February 7th. TAC call. It's not November. I'm here in wintertime. Okay, so Jen, did you want to open up with an announcement about the town hall?
Yeah, sure. Not as much of an announcement as a question, whether and when we would like to do our next town hall. Our last one was in August 2022. So about 6 months is February. Is there thoughts on when we'd like to do the next one? Are we at a point where we feel like we are ready to convene yet again?
One thought that was brought up on the planning call yesterday is, and it's the next point on here, folks have confirmed that we will be able to do an OpenSSF day concurrent with the open source summit. in Vancouver. This hasn't gone out on like the website yet, but breaking news. So do we want to do a town hall in person as part of that event? And that'll put it up to May 10 to 12. Or do we want to try and do one sooner? And I guess that's the question. Any opinions?
I don't have any strong view, really. That was Luke. See, Jeff has got his hand up.
Yeah, Jeff.
Yes, good morning. Thanks. I would strongly suggest a town hall before a virtual one, because one of the things we've heard from a number of different groups across the SIGs and working groups is still a large lack of awareness of what the OpenSSF is and what it's up to. So I think we should take advantage of the big gap between now and the summit and do a town hall perhaps sometime in the next 45 days. That is the consensus from the group here, but also look at doing something similar as part of the big week in Vancouver. That's just my input. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Jen, in terms of planning in the past, is 30 days enough time to get everyone together? And so we could do one, you say, first week of March?
Is it still Paul or?
That's
Somebody said something
that's
about Brad.
I'm
Sorry, I
sorry?
didn't catch that.
Yeah, I didn't catch that either.
But yes, I do think 30 days is probably enough. We would need volunteers who would want to speak, talk about what they're working on, a handful of folks. So pending that, yes, we'd still have enough time to be able to set up the registration, invite folks, and get that moved.
I have no concerns. I think that's a fine idea to fill in the gap and help cross-pollinate ideas, raise awareness, so that folks know more of what they're getting, you know, where to pay attention in Vancouver. So.
All right, so let this be an invitation. Anyone who is interested in presenting at our next town hall, please let us know.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. The second one is Kurt here, or I guess David or Jen, if either of you want to talk at all about Open Source Summit and OpenSSF Day.
You pointed specifically to me. I'm not sure I have any special information, but basically there's an OSS Summit in Vancouver, May 10 through 12. There had been a lot of discussions about having an OpenSSF Day, but I guess they had wanted to sound out the governing board before making any assertions, and I guess that has occurred. So, Jennifer, do you have more to share?
I think Brian might want to.
Oh, Brian, you're there. Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
Brian,
I was going to refer to Jennifer too. No, so we've been working with the LF events team. We've got a day that I forget the exact number, but it is overlapping with the first day of OSS Summit. So one thing we still have to resolve is can we avoid like the keynote, overlapping the keynotes at least. But some of the decisions we made kind of to get rolling in this were to have it be a separate registration and to ask for 199 for the event to give us the ability to have a little bit less of like a lot of people signing up and then not showing, which makes it hard to plan basically, but also then work with the Linux Foundation's team to run a proper CFP for it, rather than the kind of ad hoc kind of thing that we've done to date. I think the hope is that in one day we'd be able to cover the a lot of the different parts of OpenSSF. The goal of it is really outreach and getting things on video, in terms of what's going on in each project, but also hopefully pull some of the people in who are in town anyways for those events. We did also choose that day to avoid overlap with CDCon, the conference that the Continuous Delivery Foundation is running, because I actually felt like if we were to overlap that, we would have a would be worse for a whole bunch of in terms of like too many places to be at the same time in terms of similar content and the like. So that's the primary decision. And then if we tried to do it after, it'd be on a Friday, and conferences on a Friday really pull away. People really want to travel home, and it's Vancouver, so most people are going to have to go one hop away. So we'd really like everyone to be there. This would be, really this plus the Cloud Native Security Conference were like, I'd say, the two anchor events for us this year for our community. So in terms of like public access to things. And so we will be in Europe as well, and we probably will do another Japan one. We have to think about that and talk about that. But that's what the point of OpenSSF Day is. We really would love the TAC's help in making sure word gets out about the CFP once we publish it, which should be pretty soon, and that we have a really healthy presence there.
Awesome. Thank you for that update, Brian. That sounds wonderful. I guess the call to action for the TAC and folks on the call is keep an eye out for announcements. And at some point, we'll be looking for, paper committee reviewers. If folks want to start putting their hand up, I guess we'll, look for an email on the TAC mailing list for that. Any questions before we move on to TAC elections? Great. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Brian's sentiment about the timing on the conference. My only suggestion would be to make the financial thresholds a relatively low bar. You don't want to necessarily make it free, because then people won't necessarily respect the attendance. But based on the attendance at the CNCF Security Conference, I know there were a lot of efforts to make sure that was well attended as a kind of an inaugural event, and I think we'll have the same challenge. So just balancing the 199 just seems like a little bit of a high bar, is my gut sense, but I'm sure that striking the right balance will be the right thing to do. Thanks.
Perhaps there can be 199 for corporate attendees and a lower rate for independent or anyone who's having some financial hardship.
Yeah, safely based on the premise that it wasn't going to be 199 times the number of people in terms of revenue without the speakers, and we'll figure out some other generous process to recognize people who are active in our projects and communities.
Okay, so I know Luke had to leave. I want to get at least 15-20 minutes to TAC elections. The summary here is last year we cobbled together a process to bring together a TAC. It's been great. And we, at that time, had set up about a year before we would reevaluate the process by which we built a TAC. Here we are, about a year later. There have been some discussions since October, November of different ways to continue electing and appointing TAC members. And these two proposals, I think Bob and I have been chatting, as have several other folks. We have roughly these two paths ahead of us that seem like we should test the consensus on them today, see which one we're going to go with. Option one is to just leave things as they are right now. Four folks are elected for 1-year terms. All those terms are up, those folks could run again, and 3 seats are appointed by the governing board. And option two is to move to a staggered election right now, to set the intention that those 4 seats that are elected become elected for 2-year terms, but that they alternate which 2 seats are elected every year. And to do that, we could have all 4 seats up for election now, with 2 of them being elected for a 2-year term and 2 of them elected for a 1-year term, or some variation of that. And so that's the poll today is, do we just leave things as they are right now and look at this again in a year? No substantial changes. Option one. Option two, change the charter in some way to start setting up the cadence now. And I'd love to open the floor for a discussion and then take a vote in about 10 minutes.
So Luke here, so I'm inclined for option two, but one thing I'd like to understand, let's take a scenario where there's a complete refresh of the whole TAC. So none of the existing members are re-elected. Do we have a mechanism to ensure continuity for this period coming up?
At the moment, we don't, and that's part of why I was looking into how we change this, a few months back. And what
I could, I'll mention one thing, which is if we continue, if we do as we did before, there's the election for 4, and then the governing board appoints 3, and the governing board could decide in appointing the 3, it's the same 3, it's a different 3, but it could achieve continuity of almost half of the board that way. The second thing is, these meetings are run very openly. It's not limited to only TAC members to speak. And the number of times you take a hard vote, it's rarely ever 3 to 4, right? It's I think we're in a good spot with that concern, but I'm open to other ideas.
Yeah. The governing board appointed seats are the backstop, Luke, to your question.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
Yeah. Dan.
I just wanted to offer some experience. In the W3C, we have the technical architecture group, which I'm a co-chair of, and that group, as well as the advisory board in W3C, we go with the step process. I think that has been fairly good because it gives people a longer term. I think having a longer terms, I think it's more about the longer terms than it is about the continuity, honestly. But that's just a point of data. I don't have a strong view about either approach. But just to say that with the staggered terms has worked well for us in W3C.
Thank you for that, Dan. I will echo a sentiment there. In OpenStack and other communities I've been in. The longer elected term length lets people focus on, accomplishing whatever work they set out to do rather than focusing on re-election. Crow.
I would prefer option 2 with the staggered terms, but I feel we are too late in the game to make any changes and not derail. We have not, as a group, made any progress on anything in a couple months. So I think trying to stop everything that's already stopped and try to build a new process is not the best use of our time at the moment. So I would vote for option 1, with strongly asking we spend some time in the year before the next election cycle to get this staggering entered and through the board.
And just to clarify your opinion there, Crow, are you suggesting doing an election right now with the same terms as the election last year?
Yes, I vote for 1. I prefer 2, and would ask that we try to do something to get this in place before next time, instead of waiting the last minute.
Yeah. David, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's related to this topic, but another question is, should the board consider increasing the size of the board as well, given the amount of work?
You mean increasing the TAC?
Increasing the size, of the TAC board. In addition, to try to address these, I mean, not necessarily have it a 3-phase, but at least, as you're saying, so I don't want to confuse with this question, but it's, I think when we're sort of raising all of these issues about how the current TAC operates, that can be another question to propose in this, and related to any questions that go to the governing board for changing the charter. I don't know if people have any questions about that, to have, wider range.
I appreciate the question. I think if we open that can and dump everything out, there's other questions that we'd find as well. But I would prefer to focus right now just on the election question, not changing the structure of the TAC or anything else about it.
Well, it's not the structure, but it is related to election. Should the election be for a larger number of members of the TAC?
Yeah, I appreciate the question, David. Again, I'd love to focus today's discussion really just on the election term lengths and staggering. And that is the size of the TAC is a reasonable question to have, thing to talk about. I don't want to do it today. I think it'll derail this one and open up, then the floor becomes open to even more questions about changing the TAC.
Yeah, I said this over email. I'll just restate it. I'm somewhat ambivalent between the two options. I think staggering is great in theory. I think the tax setup already has two different groups of nominations though, and that third one could potentially overcomplicate. I'm fine with either. Option one seems simpler, but I'm not going to complain if people pick option two either.
I'll read in see Rob's comment. The TAC size could be addressed within the governing board TAC governance committee discussions. I think that's a fine place for that to go. And in fact, a fine place for any of the related charter changes to get wordsmithed and hammered out in the fullness of time. Okay, anybody else want to chime in with opinions, questions?
I mean, I'll just chime in to kind of back up what Probe said. Like when I came into this, I thought 2 makes the most sense, but maybe it doesn't. I'm mostly indifferent. Like I didn't intend to even vote on this because I just don't care. Like whatever the rest of the TAC wants, I'm fine with. But I do think that makes sense, and I think lumping the size as well as the election schedule could be a fruitful conversation. That way also the governing board isn't like hung up on this twice in a row or something like that.
Yeah, and any changes we do make, we can always revisit them. It is work to revisit these, but it is possible. Did I hear someone else chiming in? Well, I don't hear any strong preferences in either direction yet, which makes taking a vote a little bit tricky. Oh, Josh.
I'm gonna go pretty deep, I think.
Okay.
Well, what exactly is this vote? Because as you said, this is really the governing board in the charter. So is this a recommendation to the governing board?
This is the TAC members deciding, do we have a strong collected opinion to ask the board to make this change right now? And terms are up. The board gave us essentially an extension because we've all hit our 1-year term limit. You're supposed to do an election. The board said, yeah, fudge it a little bit, figure it out in the next month. So we need to come back to the board and say, here's what we want to do, and then we can do it. So today's vote is, which path do we go? Keep the TAC election as it is, and then we have an election, or ask the board to change the charter in a specific way. And I have no strong opinion right now. I do want to see us move to a staggered term. I think that is structurally, functionally valuable to build continuity, to give folks longer term links so they know, if someone who is new to the TAC or runs in the TAC election, they have more than a year to get work done in that role. I think that's been an important aspect of technical bodies that I've been in for a while. But whether we change that today or we workshop that over the next few months, I'm also ambivalent at this point. Okay, well, I'm going to ask PAC members present. If you prefer option 1 right now, with a commitment that we will address this in the TAC Governing Board Committee, before the next year, before the end of this calendar year. If you prefer that path, give me a hand raise, visually or Slack sort of thing. Ooh, there's a check. Oh, there's a yes vote option in Zoom now. Great, let's do that. The yes. I'm going to vote on 1. I see 1, 2, 3. Okay.
I drop mine in so we can move forward.
Great.
Thanks, Luke.
Thanks, Luke. That's 4. Anybody for option 2, just to record this?
Bob
Bob had
preferred-
expressed in his email that he wanted a preferred option 2.
Dan,
But
is your
perhaps
hand-
our argument might persuade him to change.
Yeah. Dan, is your hand up for option 2 or just still up?
Sorry, lowered.
Okay. That is no votes on the call today for option 2 and 1 from Bob recorded. And Josh abstains. Great, thank you all very much. Moving on then, we have a couple issues that folks have added. Crow, I think these are yours. The floor is yours.
Right. I have been seeking feedback from the TAC for 2 months on issue 131 and for 1 month on 134 and for about a month on issue 132. I would love to actually get feedback on the 2 plan proposals on if those are going to move forward or not, if we want to recommend those or if there are changes we'd like to make. And then issue 132 is kind of a straight up vote. We want to fund this or not. So I can get back to Solar Designer to see if the distros and OSS security lists will be supported by us or not.
Where do you want to start?
Has anyone read any of the 2 plan proposals I gave? Does
I've
anyone
read them,
have any
yeah.
feels about them?
I like them.
Do you like them well enough to suggest to the governing board this is something we would like to do to endorse to help address the mobilization plan?
Sure, yeah. So to be concrete, you're asking for us to make a motion to recommend the governing board do this?
Or at least for the governing board to review and redline and.
Sure. Sure, yeah, then I'll move that we recommend this to the governing board.
This.
Let's be a little more specific
Sure.
than this.
One,
You mean all 3 or one of them in
I think
particular?
there's the 2 proposals and then the vote on the funding. So the 2 proposals, 134 and
31.
131, yes. So both of those, 134 and 131. I'll drop the links in here too if people need them.
And specifically review and funding, I guess, is what we're asking for, right?
Yeah, that was the part I was a little unclear on until just now.
Great.
So yeah, the plan here is to recommend to present this to the governing board and ask them for funding. Is that right, Krob?
Correct.
Looking at these issues right now, and I will admit that they came in and I have missed them in my own business over the holidays. I'm so sorry. I don't see any specific funding numbers attached. Am I simply missing it, or were they, talked about while I was out sick?
They're involved in the summary of each plan.
Okay.
So each plan is in a GitHub repository that has each one ended up with 3 parts and then a summary section.
Got it. I will abstain from having a vote on having an opinion on this until I can go read them. David, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I know this was discussed. So this earlier about if you were out, but I mean, sort of a meta question. Why exactly? I mean, this is an important issue. I'm really curious why this is something that the TAC should be addressing directly, as opposed to delegating this to one of the other working groups and it having percolated through the other ways that the OpenSSF is addressing security issues, whether it's Alpha Omega or critical projects or anything else. I'm other than this came through a personal contact from this person to a member of the TAC. I'm not certain why this is something the TAC should be directly deciding.
So David, I think you jumped onto the next topic, which was solo designer, right?
Okay.
The motion Dan made was in regards to the other two votes first.
Okay.
Well,
we were talking about funding for this, so it's related to.
No,
Great.
the funding is for these first two, which are coming up through OpenSSF working groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think your comment is,
Yeah,
why
sorry
didn't these
then.
come through the, okay.
Sure.
Great. Any other comments on 131 or 134? Brian, I saw your hand up. It seems like that was covered. Okay. Do we have a second for that? Right, the motion Dan made. We want a little more time to review these now that they've been brought back up for attention. You know, I do.
I would be absolutely super if we add more time. I would like to not have that be another 2 months. That'd be pretty groovy. And I don't feel, since I am the prime driver behind both these plans, I'll vote on it, but I'm not going to second it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that's disingenuous.
Again, Grove, my apologies for missing it. I will make sure
you're
that
not the only one. We all
make sure that I will
ability there.
I'll make sure that I review these in the next week. So let's put this at the top of the agenda for the next TAC meeting in 2 weeks. Maybe drop a reminder on the TAC and TAC private lists, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Go read this, folks. Okay.
Can I ask one question quick if we're going to spend more time on it? So these have a bunch of funding in them. Is that like, does the governing board know you're going to ask for all that money? Like, it's not a ton, but it's not like inconsequential either.
Nobody knows anything about it because this is the first place I brought this for comments and review, and then to suggest to the governing board to take a look at it and consider.
And Brian looks like he's getting ready to say something.
Yeah, I'll just add, the governing board definitely wants to see proposals get vetting by the TAC before it gets brought to them. Secondly, there aren't quite categories ready to go that just says, hey, as soon as the TAC approves, we can cut a check. There is a process. The governing board will need to kind of proactively say, yes, this makes sense, and we'll need to decide: do we change the existing approved budget for OpenSSF to allocate for this and take something away from something else, or tolerate the more greater expense, or do we independently fundraise this from other governing board members as an add-on to what they're already spending? We have a couple of options here, and of course there's other places we might be able to go get funding, but before OpenSSF staff, before I and others spend time going and doing the fundraising, it's getting the tax approval of this seems like the right thing for the OpenSSF to be doing, and is a logical application of funds, is a critical validation point before these other mechanisms can get started.
If I may add, the general rule I've been telling people who are often mystified by the OpenSSF and realize you're involved is the governing board has the power of the purse, but the governing board wants the TAC to review things before they make those decisions. They can make the decision, given that input, but they really want that input from the TAC group here.
I think all of those comments also apply to the next topic, which is issue 132. Right. Governing board wants input from the TAC, and the TAC is here to provide that input. We have discussed it a couple times. David, I think you had a question or comment. I'll give you the floor first if anyone else wants to ask about issue 132 and the open source security mailing lists and Solar Designer after that.
Right. Well, okay. I'll re-raise the issue. Thanks very much, Ava. I mean, it's not a question of whether this is a worthwhile project or not. It's just a question of whether we want to, the TAC wants to set the precedent of various groups coming directly to the TAC asking for funding for various issues as opposed to having the TAC with its limited amount of time and attention resources to, delegate these types of initial triage to one of the working groups and to have that decision to then forward it up through that working group or some other assessment to the TAC. Not trying to just create bureaucracy or create delays, but I'm not sure that you want to set the precedent of people sort of sidestepping these other working groups or with special connections that it might to again not just make this bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy, but that to not have everybody or to not look like it's sort of nepotism or just I've got a friend on the board so on the TAC, so we'll just ask it that way, as opposed to trying to have a more regularized process and finding the appropriate working groups for these different types of funding requests.
It's an interesting point, David. I think I saw Crobe and then David with their hands up.
So this is endorsed and brought up through the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group, has been discussed there several times. They strongly endorse it. And there is precedent with the new tool chain where we have offered to help pay for operational support for that project to continue and modernize.
Thank you, Croaks. It sounds like the process that David was suggesting has been followed. And then David.
Yeah, I'm glad that Crow. I was going to basically mention the same thing. My understanding is that did go through the Vulnerability Disclosures Working Group, obviously, the TAC is going to make its own decision. That said, I think a number of us have been very, very concerned about the way things are currently being handled, and letting it to continue to carry on has its own risks. So I don't have as much druthers about the exact results, but I do worry about not taking advantage of the fact that there's an interest in changing things. So I'd love to see this improve somehow.
David, for the sake of disambiguation, the things that people are concerned about, how they're being handled, do you mean with regards to the mailing list?
Specifically that not publicly disclosed vulnerabilities are always going through a mailing server in the Russian Federation.
I share a concern about that. Yes. Yes. Okay. Do we have anyone who wants to comment on the substance of the proposal rather than how it was brought up? Any concerns or objections with this proposal right now? Seeing none, are we ready for a vote on it?
Do we have enough people to vote on this?
It's a great question.
Quorum, don't we?
Well, we don't have Bob and we lost Luke.
We have 4.
Oh,
Damn.
What?
We just barely have majority present.
Okay. Now my rules lawyer will have to come out because I think you can start the meeting with quorum, but then you just do run on majority. That's kind of a lousy way to
go. But, I would very much like to vote on this today, and I think we're very close to that line right now.
Can we vote on email, Ava?
Yeah. Can we vote partially here and then finish the vote via email? Because I sure would hate to delay this.
Totally. Let's take the vote here and then also echo it on email. Ask for everyone who votes today to also vote on email, just for the record. So if I could get a TAC members to register your vote in the Zoom reactions button. I see 3 yeses.
Dan, we're waiting on you, man.
Dan, down the rank. Lawrence, yeah.
Uh-oh.
Is Dan still here? We may have lost quorum if Dan is not actually here.
Right. I don't see any response. I'm wondering if we're having some internet connectivity issues. This is a surprising number of people to lose.
We've only lost, in terms of participant count, it only went down by 1.
Yeah,
We
Luke
did-
said
we
he
did
had to
see-
go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to Dan Lorentz connection or otherwise, but we have 3 yeses. We don't have active quorum. So unfortunately, I can't complete the vote on this.
Okay, that's probably just as well anyway, but having 3 yeses at least suggests that it's very much worth finishing up a vote on this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take that email quickly, because I do agree that this has been lingering for a while. I'd be great to close on it. Okay. Justin, I think you had a discussion on to bring up about PyPy malware. Is Justin Hutchins on the call? No. Okay. Zach?
Hey, yeah, I think I can speak to this a little bit. I don't want to take it off the agenda until Justin confirms that we've covered what he wanted to talk about. Through a couple of different working groups, in fact, at this point, the prospect of the OpenSSF being a coordinating point around malware collection has come up. And what we mean by that is in the PyPI or other package repositories, what happens when a malicious package is reported is somebody triages that internally to the repository, and then they take it down and the world never hears about it. This information could actually be quite useful to researchers, to folks in industry, both in terms of just trying to characterize what kinds of malware we're seeing, the rates at which we're seeing it, and also try to train automated tooling, much like the tooling coming out of a lot of the working groups here. For that, you need samples of malware, right? And so the I guess, broad initiative would be around having somebody in the OpenSSF, and that's where the hand waving starts, sort of kick off an initiative to coordinate better data around specifically malware packages, but package repositories generally. And so I think there was a lot of discussion in the Slack thread that roughly summarizing, everyone said, this is a good idea. My suggestion, so I'm here as a representative of the Securing Software Repos working group. That's a working group where we actually do have participation from a number of the administrators of these package repositories who are in a really great position to provide access to that. There's a number of efforts that have happened to try to interpolate based on what's disappearing from these things. But in terms of actually getting direct access to the data, I think Securing Software Repos is a great point for that. So I don't know that there needs to be any TAC action, but this is something that's come up in a number of cases, and we're still trying to coordinate around. So so I think in summary, everyone agrees this is a good idea. We want to do it, and there have been a few folks in Securing Software Repos talking about this. There was a meeting, and I think Justin was at that meeting about it, basically just to try to get a bunch of folks in the room. I personally expect that if the TAC does nothing, this will happen in order of months. If there is any urgency, then we probably do need a kick in the pants and some coordination help from the TAC.
Yeah, nothing jumps to my mind as a reason you shouldn't just do it, unless there's a funding request or you need legal support from legal or staff. And the one thing that I've, if it hasn't already been discussed in the Securing Software Repos working group, would ask folks to consider is under what sort of terms and legal protections this information is being shared among participants.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It is something that's being discussed, and we will likely come back with more concrete legal and or funding asks at some point in the future.
Great, and more than happy to, I'm sure Crow probably also feels similarly, get pulled in if you want input on that process before coming to the TAC with a proposal or request.
Appreciate that.
Yeah. Zach, go ahead.
I didn't want to prolong this discussion necessarily, but I did have a clarifying question for Zach Newman. Was this around continuing to host sort of like metadata and advisory about malicious packages, or also hosting the malicious packages themselves for later analysis? And the only reason I want to bring this up is it might impact sort of if there's a funding request or not. One is much larger than the other.
And legal issues around hosting malicious packages for research. Yes.
Of course. Yeah, great question. Thanks for asking, Zach. So yeah, both have been discussed. I think the plan would be to start with sort of the minimum viable, least invasive initiative, which is just the metadata, which again, we think is going to require less in the way of funding, require less in the way of legal support. And then possibly from there to move on to actually hosting samples of malware, which is where we would want, again, legal help. We would want to have, terms around how that was distributed, to whom that was distributed, and so on.
But Zach Newman, it does sound like that is the goal of the group, is to get there at some point. Is that correct?
Yes.
Cool. I look forward to hearing more about that over time. I do think it's a worthwhile effort. Okay, we've got a little bit of time left. The CRA response, since Brian is here, Brian, would you like to talk about that, since you were also working closely on that?
Sure. So the OpenSSF Public Policy Committee, which is a group of folks from our members who are really just help inform kind of like what positions we might want to take when we're asked for comment on various things, or there's a opportunity to leave comments on a public process, or sometimes a blog post or that kind of thing. So let me back up a little bit. The CRA, the Civil Resilience Act, Cyber Resilience Act, is something being proposed at the European Union level, and it is actually moved forward and down into the local parliaments of the different countries for commentary and further evolution, which calls for a bunch of new requirements to be placed on the creators of open source software, especially for those that are deemed to be part of critical infrastructure, including all the way up to needing to prove that you've had a third-party audit of your software development process, not of the code, but of the process. None of them are bad ideas entirely, but it seems to be jumping directly from zero to mandate and skipping over the steps of carrots and defaults and the kinds of things that we know you need when you really want to move an entire ecosystem from one state of security to a higher state. So it's there actually was a bunch of conversation about this at FOSDEM in Brussels this past week, as well as the Open Forum Europe event on Friday. We had submitted comments to a process that closed on January 26th. And I can dig up the link and forward it to all of you here if somebody doesn't beat me to it, which was about a 6-page set of comments in response to specifics in that. Thank you, Ava, for doing that.
I'm looking for ours at the moment. This is a different one.
Okay. Oh, okay, sorry. Right, that's the open source initiative. Basically, lots of people left this commentary. And so broadly stated, we were supportive of the notion of policy as a means to help nudge things in the right direction, but generally pretty critical of some specifics. They tried to carve out non-commercial open source activity, which, as we all know, I mean, David, apparently you wrote a paper a while ago that said there is no such thing as non-commercial open source.
It's much more direct. Open source software is commercial, and that's, at least in the US law, that's actually the law.
And open source software is also free speech in US court precedent, and it's like freedom in European Union. It's complicated space.
Well, they'd like to regulate it the way that they would regulate cars, for example. And if you sold a car without brakes, you know, you'd be liable for that. But not just open source software, the entire software industry is rested upon liability, limitations on or disclaimers of liability entirely. And if you want liability protection, you get a support contract. It's pretty straightforward and simple. And anyway, so we tried to approach it just very gently and about education about this is why this won't work, and you know, but it is worrisome enough that, you know, we are putting cycles into trying to help make sure people understand why that's not the right approach, and here's some alternatives. So if anyone wants to read more, I'll go dig up both the I don't think we've done a blog post on it yet, but but I'll dig up the link to the comments that we left behind on the European Union. And if anyone has any other questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, I was looking for any posts we made, and I'm not finding that link. That's why I dropped in the OSI one as sort of an overview for folks who are wondering what other foundations have said about it, or companies have said. There's a link directly in the top of that one to the, what I think 130 total responses. Yeah.
I'm going to channel my inner Bob Calloway. I had a vigorous discussion with Bob the day this was kind of shared with the foundation, and he was very disappointed that the TAC was not given a pre-read beforehand. So he asks for maybe we all share a little more and collaborate a little better in the future, please. He was surprised.
Now I know why you're wearing your shark head.
I'll share that feedback with the Public Policy Committee. I know there were folks sprinting because they're volunteers like the rest of us, and they were kind of sprinting up to the deadline. I mean, I took the final draft and put it into letterhead like on a Sunday to get it in on a Monday morning. So I think they take that as a yes. It would have been better to put it out there. I think they might also have said, you know, we'll have to kind of figure out what's the boundary line a little bit, like how much are we willing to delegate, you know, versus kind of centralized control into the TAC.
He wasn't looking for approval. He was just looking for an inform. He was not informed at all this was happening, and was very surprised, and was very vigorously talking to me about it, because I happened to be on that committee as well. And I had about an hour's worth of head start on his Slack chat on me.
Okay, well, I think those surprises become delightful rather than concerning. Oh look, something I didn't have to like follow is actually creating something of quality. But I'll share that feedback back with the public policy.
Yeah. We got just a few minutes left. We have 2 more items on the agenda. Hopefully we can get through them. Zachary Newman, you added
this should
there.
take approximately 0 time. Purely as a heads up, the Security and Software Repos group has voted or has achieved consensus on sponsoring a new project under that group. We are early stages. We are going to follow the very clearly written guidelines for proposal as a sandbox project, and are not foreseeing any issues, but just wanted to give some lead time before we sprung that on you all and asked for a vote. So follow along. That there's a draft PR. If you don't follow along at some point in the future, it will be brought to your attention again following normal procedures.
I can't remember. Does the TAC need to vote on new projects? I thought not.
Oh, maybe not. I was under the impression this is not a problem with the guidelines as written. This is a problem with my reading of them. I think there's a can I phone a friend, C-Rob?
Yeah, well, if there's money involved, I think the TAC needs to be aware. But I think a working group is allowed to make whatever choices they feel, projects they want to work on, as long as they're in alignment with the vision of what we want to achieve. So I appreciate the inform.
I think in general, we have tried to make sure each working group informs up what they're doing. And so a quick inform like this is great.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. I think at some point there's a PR that needs to get merged by someone in the TAC repo as well. So
certainly for assigning a graduation level or stage to a project, that's a TAC vote. And depending on how technical project is, might require a little bit of, diligence on the tax part. I guess, Zach, the one question to either answer now or get spun up in that is this a whole cloth new project being started in a working group, or is it being contributed from outside of the OpenSSF? It already has IP associated with it.
The latter, and again, the
Okay.
contribution docs are clear about what needs to happen from a legal perspective.
Yep.
So we will. I don't think I want to get the whole TAC involved, but we will send notes as the lawyers from the contributing company will connect those with LF and legal and so on.
I am delighted to hear that those docs are sufficient. If you have any issues with the sort of contribution guides, please feel free to open PRs or issues and tag me in them, since I will go back and update them as needed if they're not sufficient.
Yeah, so far so good. I will, at the end of this process, make any suggestions for clarifications that we run into.
Awesome. With just 2-3 minutes left, Luigi, I think we might have time for your topic after all.
Well, we can try to introduce it, and we can continue maybe in the next meeting. But I was checking the repo in OpenSSF organization in GitHub, because with my current working group that is long name, Identify Security Threats. At least this is the short name in Slack. There is this project, Security Insights, where we are trying to define a specification for a YAML file that scanner can use to retrieve some information that at the moment have no specific standard or policy, or a lot of projects have them, but in different place. And I have seen that some repo don't have a security policy. Other one have a security policy or security.md, but we don't have a standard security policy for our organization. And maybe we would like to have some standard policy that we can enable to an organization level using GitHub, because it's very easy. You can use the folder.github where you add some policy that you want to have in the repo, and you can overwrite them easily in every repo if you want, just adding the file with the same name. So maybe a security.md can be a nice idea, especially a unique contact that the researcher can use to contact the OpenSSF to report a vulnerability. And the other one is if we want to pay, at least for the most important project, like the scorecard, for example, but the most popular, if we want to pay or have bugs or something similar for the vulnerability that the researcher can send us. And this is probably an action item, not for my working group, but for the TAC meeting or the board, or who need to take the decision.
Both of these sound like good discussions to take to the mailing list and continue bringing up in Slack. The first one, a standard security.md template might be part of a project repo template. I don't know that we have one consistently applied at this point. And I know we do have projects that exist outside of the OpenSSF GitHub org. So doing it at an org-wide level would not cover everything. There's some conflicting things there that are probably good discussions to have either in the TAC channel or in that working group.
Okay, maybe I can start from the TAC channel and then we can try to move. Okay.
Great.
And yeah,
we are just about at time, but Krove, I see your hand.
The Vulnerability Disclosures Group, I think, has a template. We would be glad to help and collaborate on getting this implemented across the foundation.
Fantastic. Wonderful.
Nice.
Okay. Thank you all for a lively discussion today.
Quick note, Ava, who's going to bring up that vote on that we need to move to electronic?
Done. Check your email.
Thank you, Krove.
Wow.
The shark jumped on it. Love it. Bye, everybody. See you next time.
Take care.